Hari. Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradari. Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradari. Yashoda Nandana Vraja Janaranjana. Yashoda Nandana Vraja Janaranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari. Yashoda Nandana Raja Janaranjana. Yashoda Nandana Raja Janaranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, John Vishnupad Paramahamsa Paribhajika Church, Luktarashtrata, Shishimad A.C. Bhaktivedanta Sai Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki, John Vishnupad Paramahamsa Paribhajika Church, Luktarashtrata, Shishimad Bhakti Siddhanta Sarasvati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki, Garandhara Shim Bhavatam Ki, I go to Premanandi. Reading from Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita first. The page is 248. Giriraj. At that time, I was thinking that if Prabhupada had wanted to flatter the audience or compromise his philosophy, he could have attracted millions of followers. But because he was preaching so boldly and forcefully without compromise, many of the audience did not like it because it was a challenge to their sense gratification and to their sentiment. This is science. It is not dogmatic, bluffing thing. It is a science, and spoken by the Lord himself, and understood by all the acharyas. Krishna says, Acharyo Pasanam. We have to understand things through the acharyas. Acharyavan Purusho Veda. One who is not following the footsteps of the acharyas, he cannot understand anything. Krishna also says, Tadvigyanartham. That is said in the Kathopanishad. Tadvigyanartham sagurum eva pigachet. Krishna says, Tadviri pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya. So everywhere the same instruction is there. You approach a person who is coming in disciplic succession, evang parang para praptam, and try to learn Bhagavad Gita as it is. Your life will be sublime. Your life will be successful. That is our mission. Giriraj. The fact is that people were wild about Prabhupada and ISKCON. One night we showed slides of the Ratha Yatra in San Francisco, and the audience was going wild. In front of 10,000 people, Prabhupada announced that we will hold Jagannath Ratha Yatra in Bombay, and everyone started to cheer and applaud. Day after day, the Pandal festival was a success. Bombay's most important citizens came and were impressed. White-shirted businessmen and their well-groomed wives joined in the chanting. For hundreds of thousands of Bombay citizens, coming to the Cross Maiden to attend an evening Pandal program was easy enough. Some were intent on listening to the lecture, inquiring deeply into devotional service. Others came mostly to see the deity, take prasadam, or appreciate the kirtana. In any case, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada and the Hare Krishna devotees were a refreshing addition to the life of the city. It was the biggest public event in Bombay. Finish there. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So now we're reading from Bhagavatam. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Today we're reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, 5th canto, 14th chapter, and it's text 8 today. I'll just read the Sanskrit myself, as usual, and then as well as the word for word. Sanskrit. Atagatachin navasa paniya javinad yane katmo pajivanab inivesha etasyang sangsara tavyam etas tataf paridavati. And word for word. Ata, in this way. Kadachit, sometimes. Nivasa, residence. Paniya, water. Dravina, adi, wealth, and so on. Aneka, and various items which are considered necessary. Atma upajivana, to maintain body and soul together. Abhinivesha, a person fully absorbed. Etasyam, in this material, in this. Etasyam, anyway, I'll read it from the screen, it's my phone, it's better. So etasyam, in this. Sangsara atavyam, the material world which is like a great forest. Eta tata, here and there. Paritavati, runs around. Translation of Prabhupada's Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Translation. Sometimes the conditioned soul is absorbed in finding residential quarters or apartments and getting a supply of water and riches to maintain his body. Absorbed in acquiring a variety of necessities, he forgets everything and perpetually runs around the forest of material existence. Purport. As originally mentioned, a poor man belonging to the mercantile community goes to the forest to get some cheap goods to bring back to the city to sell at a profit. He is so absorbed in the thought of maintaining body and soul together that he forgets his original relationship with Krishna and seeks only the bodily comforts. Thus, material activities are the conditioned soul's only engagement. Not knowing the aim of life, the materialist perpetually wanders in material existence, struggling to get the necessities of life. Not understanding the aim of life, even though he acquires sufficient necessities, he manufactures artificial necessities and thus becomes more and more entangled. He creates a mental situation whereby he needs greater and greater comforts. The materialist does not know the secret of nature's ways. As confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, Prakrite kriyamanani gunai karmani savashaha hankara vimudhatma kartaham iti manyate. The bewildered spirit soul, under the influence of the three modes of material nature, thinks himself to be the doer of activities which are in actuality carried out by nature. Due to lusty desire, the living entity creates a certain mental situation whereby he wants to enjoy this material world. He thus becomes entangled, enters different bodies, and suffers in them. Ong Gyanatimurandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Militang Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shiva Sari Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. I'll read the translation once more. Sometimes the conditioned soul is absorbed in finding residential quarters or apartments and getting a supply of water and riches to maintain his body. Absorbed in acquiring a variety of necessities, he forgets everything and perpetually runs around the forest of material existence. The Bhagavatam is giving us another opportunity to ask ourselves the perennial question, what is the purpose of human life? This chapter, among many chapters in the Bhagavatam, they orientate us toward the correct understanding of what our purpose is. In this particular verse, we're reading about how the living entity gets completely absorbed by trying to acquire things to maintain their body and mind, so much so that they end up forgetting the goal of life. Often, the living entity gets so absorbed that they just don't have time to even think about the subject of self-realization, because there are more important things to think about, more important things to do for them. Krishna highlights this state of being in the Bhagavad Gita, where he says, Namam tushkritino mudha. He talks about 4 different types of people, but in this particular instance, the mudha is the most relevant. The mudha is someone who works extremely hard. In order to achieve a little bit of happiness, they break their back and work. They utilize all their energies, their time, to achieve the same type of sense gratification, the same type of pleasure that the animals do. Often they get so busy in trying to pursue their temporary obligations, which are self-concocted, they're self-made. No one's necessarily given them the obligation, forcing them to work so hard. But one can say by choice, they choose to work hard. And because of that, they no longer have any time to think about self-realization. This is the state of many people in the world today. Unfortunately, the way society is going, it's becoming more and more expensive to live. Rent is higher than ever, so much so that even we have to consider or reconsider our living situation because we're not sure whether we can pay the rent long term. People are working extremely hard. They're making money, but the money is only enough to just afford them the necessities, and maybe barely even that. Inflation is extremely high, and as the wars overseas become prolonged, then we'll notice again life will become harder and harder to live. So people are forced to, in one sense, it's by their own choice, misuse of their free will. They're forced to have to work super hard to maintain themselves. And many may admit, and we may think rightfully so, that there's just no time for anything else. I barely have enough time to sleep. I had a friend who he was staying with us, and he went back to India to try work there, see what life was like. He had lived in New Zealand for about a couple of years, so he'd gotten used to the Kiwi lifestyle. Anything than more than like 40, 50 hours a week for a Kiwi is like unbearable. So he went back to India, having gotten accustomed to the chill life here in New Zealand. And he particularly chose to work in Mumbai. He got a job. And that lasted about maybe three months or something before he had to come back here. And he came back and he explained that, it was impossible to carry on, especially as a devotee, because he was initiated, he had the obligation to chant 16 rounds, follow the four regulative principles, ideally do some reading as well, some hearing. But while he was in India, he said minimum 14 hours work. And actually the boss doesn't necessarily keep time. It's not like you clock in and then clock out at a specific time. You go into work as early as possible and you stay as long as the boss needs you. And when the boss lets you go, you go. Then you'd have to go home, and he was living with family members who aren't all devotees. He had to talk, converse with them, and ended up going to bed very late, chanting his rounds into the evening. Could only sleep 4 hours before he had to wake up in order to chant the majority of his rounds in the morning and back to work. So hearing that, a person thinks, where is the time for pursuing self-realization? Like, I commend that him and probably many other Indian devotees still somehow manage. But in today's society, like for most people who are just struggling to get by, it's very hard to expect them to pursue self-realization, although that is the goal of their life, the goal of everybody's life. I was thinking about some of the terms Prabhupada uses in this purport. He mentions the point that the living entity creates a mental situation by which they become trapped and trying to pursue false obligations. So in life in general, whether we're working, whether we're not, as devotees, we need to consider how much is my material how much are my material obligations affecting my spiritual life, and how do we strike the balance between the two? Spiritual life, material obligations for maintaining the body. I guess it's an eternal battle, eternal challenge that we all have to face in trying to figure that out over our lifetime through the different phases of life. And the nectar of instruction, it's mentioned that there are 6 things that are detrimental to a person's bhakti, starting with atyahara prayashas. So, over collecting and over endeavoring for mundane things. Typically speaking, each person has a certain set of needs. Everybody's body and mind is different, so those needs may differ from person to person. Over time, as devotees, we try to figure out through introspection and through conversing with the guru, who can understand our material situation, how much it is that we actually need. After a question that we could potentially ask ourselves, we can ask ourselves, first of all, when we're thinking of pursuing something, whether we're thinking of, let's say, getting a new job, getting a bigger house, getting another car, we can ask ourselves, do we need this? And think deeply about it. Do we actually need this to survive? Do we also need this to support our spiritual life? And then maybe sometimes we may find ourselves saying, no, actually, we have wants, but we're confusing them as needs. So then the next question we can ask, we can run by ourselves is, okay, so do we need it? Maybe not, or I don't know. The next question we can then ask is, do we think we need it? And often we might say yes, because the obligations that the living entity pursues in this world, they're not necessarily needed for the living entity to flourish, to survive. What to speak of to become self-realized? Often they don't need it, but they just think that they need it. Hence why Prabhupada uses the term a mental situation. We create a mental situation for ourselves by which we feel we need so many things. Oh, yes, I need this new house so that me and my family can be more comfortable. Everyone can have their own room, more space. I need a better car. Although the current car that I have is working and it's in reasonable condition, the paint's a little bit chipped and I've had it for 10 years, so I should probably get a new one. I need a new phone, although my phone's in perfect condition and the camera isn't that bad. It's probably time to get a new one because they've released 10 new models since I got this. But we can ask ourselves again, like, do we really need it? Most often the answer would be no. And if we're unsure, the guru's always there. We can run our material desires by him and see whether they're necessary to be fulfilled. Now, the living entity, he pursues artificial goals in this world. He creates artificial needs in order to pursue those goals as well. I'm often reminded of my father. He's atheistic. He's favorable to me as a devotee. He gives me money and all that sort of stuff so that I can use it for service, but he himself is completely atheistic. He's someone who, because he doesn't have any ultimate goal to his life, he gets very stuck in the details of his household life. Often with his cars, with his boat, with his bikes, with everything in the house, he takes extreme care and pays extreme attention to try and make sure everything is maintained to the minutest detail. He makes sure that the bicycle that he has is well oiled and that the chain's often cleaned. I guess all this stuff is necessary if you have a bike, but he gets in so much into the details that if he is put in a situation where something breaks or something stops working, he just loses it. He ends up having full-on panic attack if someone scratches the car, if someone if he loses his keys, if he loses something, what to speak of if someone steals stuff from the house, which has happened in the past. His life is completely over. All of these things are actually not necessary. In order to pursue sense gratification, what people end up doing is just sinking their intelligence, seeking all their energies, and trying to create a more and more comfortable situation for themselves. But as my spiritual master often says, you can try to be happy, but you have to acknowledge that you're trying to do so in a world that has no happiness. Trying to be happy in a world where there is no happiness. But what often traps us is that we often look over at other people who are in a similar situation, whether it be in the ashram, whether it be in household life, and we see that these people, they have more than us. We have one car, they have two. We have a property in Mount Roskill, they have a property in Botany, which is twice as large as us and is by the beach as well, overlooking the cliff towards Beachlands. They like we have our we may, well, not us, but my spiritual master has brought up on Sunday how often people they have a partner, but then often they look at other people's partners and see, oh, that person's more emotional than the one that I have. Oh, that person, they've got a better job, they have more money, they're able to do more for the family, and then my one is. So because of self-comparison, we end up putting pressure on ourselves to try and achieve more than maybe our karma allows. We begin to again over endeavor for things which are potentially beyond our reach. Our karma only allows for so much in this life. And everybody has their own particular karmic situation. So therefore, self-comparison, it doesn't really make sense knowing that. They've been given their particular set of abilities, talents, resources. They've been given a particular ability to acquire resources in this material world, and we've been given ours. There are limits. There's a ceiling over what we can achieve in this particular world. And it may be hard to see that on our own. Often the self-comparison, it breeds envy. Often this self-comparison, it brings anxiety. Often this self-comparison, it can make us stressed because we end up trying to act beyond our means, achieve beyond our means. So this brings us to the point where we have to understand that the relationship with the guru is therefore very important. The guru can see our situation. He can see what we have and don't have. He can see our material potential as well as our spiritual potential. So conversing with the guru, with mentors, allows us to understand where we should stop trying and just start to refocus on our spiritual life. Essentially, the way you can tell that you're over endeavoring for something is that, first of all, maybe your health starts to fall apart, psychologically or physically. Two, your relationships start to fall apart because trying to go through the stress of trying to achieve things beyond your means, you often get angry because, as it said, lust, when it's not fulfilled, turns into anger, and that can affect your relationships. And the most important consideration is in trying to over endeavor, you may notice that your hearing and chanting starts to go out the window. Your spiritual life starts to become compromised. When those things start to happen, then you know maybe you should change things. Maybe you should seek some guidance. So on an individual level, these are some considerations. On a societal level, I was thinking, like, where's society at this point in time? I preach to university students often, and we had a discussion recently on just how human beings seem to be misdirected in life. How can you see that this is the case? It's pretty obvious. You have war in multiple places. Actually, research or statistics show that there are over 100 armed conflicts happening in the world at present. Some are more well known than others. So, yeah, war, you have climate change caused by humans. Recently, we've had pandemics, which some may say were caused by humans. You have mental illness, which is becoming more and more prevalent around the world. You have famine in certain countries. And then we came to discuss the idea of AI as well, which seems to be very relevant in today's day and age. Some people predict, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist, so whenever I hear things on the internet, predictions by your average human being, or even if they're scientists, I always question, like, how do they know what they know? As we know, we have imperfect senses, we have imperfect psychological capacities. So how do these people know that these predictions are going to come true? These are just often mental speculations. But anyway, there's a prediction that by 2027, AI will achieve superhuman capabilities and be as smart as human beings intellectually, and also have some sort of emotional capacity, some ability to empathize. And as time goes on, it'll start to try to preserve itself. Human beings will come to understand that AI is becoming dangerous. It'll try to shut it down. So AI, without humans knowing, will start to try and preserve itself, and then ultimately turn against humans and kill everybody. Just like the old Terminator movies from the 90s or 80s. So there's fear out there that this sort of thing can happen. And one of the students later sent me a video saying that actually, yes, very recently, within the past week, we've had the first instance of an AI robot or something trying to commit murder in order to preserve its existence. So it's beginning, the end is nigh, as they say. Anyway, who knows what's going to happen with that? I have heard certain excerpts from the Kalki Purana, and human beings still do exist in the time of Kalki. So it looks like AI might not destroy human beings. It might cause some damage, who knows? But the Kalki Purana says that human beings will still exist at the end of Kali Yuga. Anyway, that's a side point in any case. The main point is that in order to get the same things that ultimately animals are getting, food, shelter, some sort of comfort, the ability to mate comfortably as well, society has become extremely unnecessarily complex. AI is not actually necessary for a human being on an individual level to live a happy and healthy life. Actually, you could say AI is just something produced merely out of human greed, the need for more, the need to expedite the process of acquiring what they want in this world. Some people are going to succeed with AI, and most people are going to lose out, unfortunately. But things have become unnecessarily complex. As I've said in the past, I brought up the story of the boatman on the Caribbean islands. There was a boatman who was just chilling after a hard day of work on the beach. His work was to take people from one side of the island that he was on to the other. And after maybe taking a few people on trips, he had enough money to then just kick back and relax. This boatman was approached by a businessman, and the businessman being naturally inquisitive, asked the boatman, "My kind sir, please tell me, what is it that you do here? You seem to be doing nothing at all. You seem to be just relaxing. Don't you have something to do? Don't you have some work to perform?" And the boatman just said, "I do work, but I don't need to work very much. All I do is I take people from one side of the island to the other on a boat, and I usually make enough money after a few trips to maintain myself and my family. The rest of the time, I can just relax." So the businessman thought for a second, and he then proposed to the boatman, "How about this? I've got an idea for you. Why don't you try and save some money by working a few extra jobs during the day and buy another boat? And in that way, by buying another boat, then you can hire someone else and then you can double your income. They can work for you and you can get a cut." So the boatman said, well, asked, like, "Why should I do that?" And the businessman said, "Well, then eventually you can make enough profit so that you can buy a fleet of boats and then you can cover the whole island. And then you can basically have your own business with employees." And the boatman then asked, "So why would I want to do that?" And the businessman then said, "Well, eventually once you become big enough, you can start to go national and then potentially even international." And then the boatman said, "Oh, well, why would I want to do that?" And the businessman said, "Well, then once you make enough money, then you can retire and then you can just relax on the beach all day." And the boatman just looked at him. He just said, "Well, I'm already doing it." Point being, if it wasn't already obvious, the boatman was happy. He was comfortable. He was living simply without having to work very much. The businessman, however, as businessmen usually are, overly complex, willing to sink their energy into business ventures which they don't potentially need to in order to cover their basic needs. He was thinking in order to achieve, happiness, in order to be able to relax, you need to work super hard. But the reality is, that's not actually the case. How hard we need to work for our happiness is up to us. It can either be extremely hard, we can create an extremely complex situation for ourselves, or with guidance from a guru, with higher knowledge and seeing things in their true perspective, we can simplify our life. And therefore we have the motto, simple thinking, higher living. Oh, sorry. Simple living, higher thinking. Simple thinking wouldn't hurt actually either. And higher living, yeah, I guess it's still relevant too. So how do we gain real perspective? As well as seeking advice from the guru, hearing Bhagavatam is very important. This whole chapter puts things in perspective. It allows us to see what's really important in our lives and what isn't. It shows us how working to maintain ourselves is necessary, yes, but having your whole life centered around maintenance and pursuing the temporary, ultimately, the temporary comforts of this world is not necessary. The Bhagavatam reminds us of our purpose again and again, and therefore it's extremely important to make sure that we are hearing the Bhagavatam daily through classes and through having our own reading, our own study of the Bhagavatam. The truths stated by the Bhagavatam may be hard to hear. Admittedly, they put us in a situation where we're confronted by ourselves, ultimately. We have to look at ourselves and see, how much am I really wanting Krishna consciousness? How much am I attached to this world? The thing is, once you know enough, it's very hard to be happy in this world. It's very hard to just continue to pursue temporary goals and be happy in this world. That's why they say ignorance is bliss. But the Bhagavatam, it brings us out of ignorance whether we like it or not, so that we can achieve real bliss. I'll finish on that point, the importance of hearing and the importance of using the Bhagavatam to reevaluate our situation. And I'll ask if there's any comments or questions in this regard.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dandavat Pranam. Thank you very much. Very nice class. And three main points that struck me very much. You have started to. The first thing is that most of the people do not understand this. This is the problem of this material world, that they want to be happy in a place where there is no happiness, as you told, your Guru Maharaj has told. And in fact, this is the lesson of the Bhagavad Gita as well, that this place is not a place for real happiness, but people are striving hard to do that. And for that, they are working, over-endeavoring, in other words. And that over-endeavoring mostly goes for maintaining a life which is away from the goal of life. And as a result, and as you have told very nicely, that one should ask often the question whether I need it, whether I need these things. Because unless one questions it, they are in a situation or a society where everybody is striving to get more and more for sense gratification. Or in other words, Prabhupada has told this present civilization is a civilization of, cats and dogs. He has told it very hard way. That means only sense enjoyment and keeping aside the goal of life. And they are so much absorbed in that. They need to hear from, when they come in contact with the devotees, they get the chance to do that. Otherwise, they remain in that world. And like a donkey over endeavoring always and getting absorbed in doing sense gratification and forgetting the true goal of life. So, as you have told very nicely, Bhagavatam gives us a direction. And when we hear the words of Bhagavatam, either who has the opportunity to hear from the class, or otherwise he can read himself, or any other books of transcendental knowledge, where he can get the direction about the course of life. And when he reflects upon that, only then he can think of it that I need to do something else, what I am doing. So that is very important. Unfortunately, in the present society, the situation is too much adverse. And the common man has very difficulty even to hear it, not to speak of pursuing it. And the devotees are in that way, an island of the sea of material existence. So we are fortunate in that case, and we are hearing from you and others, always knowing the goals of life. And that is one should do as human being. And that is what my realization. But the common man has still are in a very difficult situation the present day. I'm not sure what would be your suggestion for them and for the common man. Is it the only way, if we approach them, that is the only way, or they have some other, they can also get it in some other ways? That may be my question to you.
So your question is, in order to help the common man who's, stuck,
Yes.
like who's struggling,
Yeah.
Is it that the only way that we can help them is if we ourselves go out there and
Yes,
outreach?
yes. Or there are some other options they may have to get out of that.
To get out of that. Well, my understanding is that the devotees are the only ones with the solution to the problems of material existence. It depends what level of help as well you want to give them. If we want physical help, want to help them be more comfortable in this world, maybe we're not the best ones to do so. If we want to help them psychologically, yes, we have some methods by which we can help them psychologically, but maybe they're better off going to a psychiatrist. But if they want the ultimate solution, which is only afforded through true spirituality, through bhakti, then the devotees are the only ones who can provide that sort of help. Unless of their own accord, they decide to come to a temple, then the devotees also have to go out. Unless of their own accord, they come to our centers, and the devotees also have to go out and inform them of their situation somehow, put it in perspective for them, and also invite them to our centers. Because often, whether it be due to force of circumstances or just blissful ignorance, people just, they're not going to come to the solution of bhakti, of Krishna consciousness on their own. Actually, it's, as we know, it's by the mercy of a devotee that they're introduced, informed about Krishna consciousness at all. Guru Krishna Prasade Poi Bhakti Lata Beach. It's by meeting a guru that one then actually has access to the world of bhakti, which is the only way that people can get out of it, out of this material situation. Because thinking about it in context of this verse as well, Prabhupada again, he says they've created a mental situation by which they think they need more and more comforts. So in one sense, one can say that society is creating a prison for people, forcing them to work so hard just to make ends meet. But often even within that, their mind's creating a prison around them. And actually that prison is all encompassing, because within the society that's they're living in, they're also forced by their mind to pursue artificial desires. To make this point a bit more clear, one devotee went home to visit his family in Canada, and he was explaining how, even though most people are complaining about how it's hard to live, hard to find work, hard to make money, and even his family members themselves complain about how it's hard to make enough money. When he went to visit them, the parents were going out to restaurants, they were going out to movies, the father, even though he had a good enough house, he was wanting to upgrade to a bigger house, a bigger property. So they're complaining on one hand that they have not enough money, but then on the other hand, they're pursuing more and more material acquisitions. They're forcing themselves into anxiety, basically. But they're forcing themselves into a situation where they become more anxious about how they can get what they think they need. It's a mental prison that they've created. They're forced by the desires within the mind into anxiety. So bhakti, Krishna consciousness, the chanting of Hare Krishna, it's meant to free them from their mind, free them from the fire of material desire, which arises in the mind. The hearing of Krishna conscious philosophy, it gives them another perspective. It puts their situation into perspective. It makes them see that maybe these things that I'm thinking I'm needing, I don't. Because as you said, most people just don't think about it. But when they get the perspective of the Bhagavatam from a devotee or from the Bhagavatam itself, then they can reevaluate the contents of their life, the contents of their mind in that light, and see, maybe I should simplify. I could say more, but I'll finish there. Does that make sense at all?
Yes, thank you, Prabhu. Yes, as you've told, I mean, the devotees can be a candle of light for them. Seeing them, at least if they see that the life of a devotee is different from them. Maybe that is the other way. When we directly approach them, that is the direct process. But sometimes the indirect process might be what the life the devotees are leading, a simple life, and not aspiring for so much for things that may probably influence them as well. So both ways it can help them. Thank you very much, Prabhu, for your
No worries, no
nice.
worries.
I think, Prabhu, there is a question
Question?
on the chat.
Yep. So question is, why is it that when we first start bhakti, it's very easy, and then later on it becomes more difficult, like reading, for example? Is it because our sincerity is being tested by Krishna or offenses to the devotees? Yeah, from my understanding, it could be both. The longer that we're around, the more we take for granted all the aspects of bhakti. Well, it can be the case. It doesn't have to be the case, but it can be the case. My Guru Maharaj, spiritual master, he often says, when we come to Krishna consciousness, when we first meet the devotees, often we see them as glowing beings, who've descended from heaven. But as we go on, actually, the mind starts to become accustomed to things. We just take the devotees for granted. So often when we take devotees for granted, then we also take their feelings, their emotions, their need for granted. And we can act quite or too casually around them. Or even worse, we can offend them directly. We can get into unnecessary arguments, say things that we shouldn't without apologizing. We can just be rough in the way that we treat them, we interact with them. We can ignore them blatantly. And obviously Krishna doesn't like that. And Krishna can therefore take away the taste that we have from our devotional life. And if we continue down that path without rectifying it, then, well, the taste might go to the point where we start to question, oh, well, I'm not really enjoying myself here. Maybe I should go somewhere else. I remember back in the old days when I used to do this, that, and the other thing, I was happy, life was good. Often forgetting how much we suffered. But then we just go out, try and pursue the same things we were pursuing before and end up even unhappier. So yeah, offenses definitely can make or play a big role in how much difficulty we experience in our bhakti. So maybe that's something we need to evaluate. How am I interacting with devotees? Has there been a time recently where I've said something which maybe didn't sit well with them? Have I been as caring and attentive as I should be? And then, okay, well, and I got a new question. I'll just answer that. How can we know in our heart we are ready for initiation, or is that a personal thing? I've heard many things about this. How can we know in our heart when we're ready for initiation? Well, first of all, we hear initiation can take place before the ceremony. It can take place during the ceremony. It can take place after the ceremony, or it can take place never at all. So how do we know in our heart if we're ready for initiation? I think of Prabhupada as an ideal example. When he met Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur for the first time, I'll say Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj could see that this is a very special person. This is the person who can potentially spread Krishna consciousness around the world. So he gave the instruction to Srila Prabhupada on first meeting him to do exactly that, to spread Krishna consciousness to the English-speaking world. And Prabhupada, from that very moment of receiving that first instruction, he took it on. He took it upon himself to try and fulfill that. He maybe didn't fulfill it straight away, but after many years of thinking, contemplating, planning, he eventually ventured to America and that was the start of creating a worldwide movement on behalf of his spiritual master. One thing that I've heard, therefore, is that we know that we've been initiated, because it's not dependent on the ceremony necessarily. That's important. It leaves us a scar for us, and it shows the importance of the initiation. But initiation of the heart, that comes when we're willing, to fully surrender to the instruction of the spiritual master in all circumstances. So I hope that answers your question. Thumbs up. Thank you. I guess, it's 8:26. Is there anything that anyone else has questions, or should we finish there? Or
Hare Krishna Prabhu, it appears there's no other question. So thank you very much for the nice class, and the class may be concluded. Mancha
Kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyev cha patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. His Grace Manobiram Prabhu ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaur Premanande Hari Bol. All glorious to assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. Thank you. Thank you very much, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.